Back in 2018, in the wake of the Parkland High School mass shooting, a group of former Navy SEALs banded together and launched a company called ZeroEyes. Their mission is to prevent and mitigate these types of violent events. And the means that they're going about achieving that mission is through technology. Here we're talking about artificial intelligence, specifically object detection algorithms. And so they went and they trained algorithms designed to detect the presence of guns. Then they combine those algorithms, they run those algorithms on CCTV cameras to flag specific instances of person with one of those weapons. So my guest today is Tim Sulzer, who is one of ZeroEyes co-founders and the company's CTO. And we talk beyond just how the models work and how they were made to work and validated to work, but into the impacts that they're seeing on the ground, the impact that they're having, the ways in which this level of automated security is changing operations on the ground, and where it all could go. So if you are new to the pod, I am your host, Ian Kreitzberg. If you are not new, you knew that already, and thanks for being here. This is the Deep View Conversations. Tim, thanks so much for joining me today.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so, we've connected before. It's been a couple years, which is kind of crazy, but ZeroEyes has been around, even before that. You guys got your start in 2018. And let's just start there, and then there's plenty of other stuff to dive into. But with the kind of foundational story that you had behind this company.
So we got started in 2018, shortly after the shooting in Parkland, Florida. And that shooting was particularly terrible because the shooter was in a stairwell underneath a security camera for, I think, 3 or 5 minutes before the first shot was fired. So we looked at that and we essentially had this idea of, if somebody was watching that camera, they would have been able to stop that shooting. And why aren't we watching cameras? It's basically because there's not enough attention span and people hours to be able to have eyes on every camera everywhere. And at the same time, AI was progressing, object detection was becoming a reality. I'd worked with some computer vision in a previous startup, and it was a natural progression to be able to say, if we can detect any number of objects, faces, dogs, cats, why can't we detect guns on security cameras and use that as a means to provide proactive situational awareness during a shooting? Early days of ZeroEyes, we got started basically just looking for, can we build a model to detect guns? That was the first MVP. And we started off by collecting images from Google Images, web scraping images, open image data set, and basically trying to build a model that would detect guns. And we tested on videos like clips from The Matrix and random images that we would scrape from the web. We found out really quickly that those types of models that are trained off web images are not easily transferable or generalizable to security cameras. And so we deployed our first model on a security camera, and the performance was terrible. The images didn't match up to what the AI was trained on. So the next step from there was we went out and bought some cheap security cameras on Amazon and hung them up in our CEO's backyard, which is where our office was at the time. We were working out of his basement. And we found out really quickly that generating our own data in a realistic environment using a real camera, a real sensor, was the trick that we needed. And so we invested most of our early time in the company into just building a quality model and building an organic data set.
That's the perfect jumping off point, right? I mean, we hear about this all the time, kind of no matter the application. If you're talking about, studying whales off the Pacific coast, or in your case, identifying weapons, it all comes down to data, the quantity of the data and the quality of the data. So tell me more about that. How much data did you have to collect, and how did you think about coming up with different ways of varying the types of data that you're collecting to making sure you're getting different angles of, I guess, as great a variety of weapons as you could kind of conceive of?
Yeah, fortunately, being a co-founder with 4 former Navy SEALs, we never had a shortage of weapons to use as examples. But exactly that, garbage in equals garbage out, and we view our data set as probably the most important thing in the company right now. In the early days, we never had enough data. That was 100% of our problem, and we spent a lot of time traveling to different environments, using security cameras to collect data in with different backgrounds, different lighting conditions, and that was really the challenge that we identified early on. Was security cameras are mounted in all different types of environments. Security camera quality, video quality from cameras varies greatly from camera to camera and manufacturer to manufacturer. So it was really important for us to have representative examples of all of the types of environments that we really wanted to detect guns in. And so it started in Mike's backyard and progressed to local schools. We spent every weekend for months in the early days traveling to different schools and using their camera systems to record weapon data. And then the next step from there was, we really wanted schools to allow us to record data when there was actual people in the camera views. But schools were not very willing to have us walk around during the daytime with guns, with active students in the hallways. So we then came up with the idea, well, if we can't collect this data in real time, how can we use the customer backgrounds to build in some generalization into the model? And our solution was to build a green screen AI lab, essentially. So we built out a 5,000 square foot AI lab with full green screen walls, and we hung about 100 security cameras throughout the warehouse. So we were able to walk around with ZeroEyes employees with guns and then overlay our customer backgrounds behind them to give that context in the scene that we weren't able to record in real life. And that's where we've been for the last few years. But there's a lot of trends around synthetic data generation that will probably obsolete that at some point. But we've invested a lot as a company in having a really high quality data set that represents as many possible scenarios as possible.
So beyond that, you talked a little bit about the algorithms, and I just want to nail a little deeper into that. You said back in 2018 we were seeing advancements in object detection, which is basically that's the core thing behind what enables your technology. That's also one of the major algorithms in self-driving cars. So talk to me about beyond the data set, building the system itself, the algorithms. How do you validate that? What was the process like? And, you're building from scratch. You're not piggybacking off of other systems, it sounds like. So I imagine if the data collection process was intensive, the algorithm construction process possibly was more so.
Yeah, there's a few different steps to it, because when you think about the entire video pipeline that processes the data, there's many different steps from simply just decoding the video, then passing it through an inference engine, and then object tracking. So it's changed quite a bit over the years, but in the early days we started with probably the best object detection technology at the time was fast RCNN or faster RCNN models. We were just starting to see YOLO models be released, which I think we're on maybe the 8th or 10th iteration of YOLO models at this point, and it's kind of diverging quite a bit. But in the early days, it really affected our hardware processing. I mean, we were trying to solve this problem of being able to process real-time video on at the customer's site, because customers are sensitive to their security camera data being sent somewhere else. So we identified really quickly we have to do this with GPUs. We have to do it with GPUs on premise. And so the model selection came down to what model gives us the best balance of accuracy and compute efficiency. And for us, faster RCNN models were the highest performing at that time. They were definitely more computationally heavy, which meant that we couldn't load as many cameras per GPU as we wanted to, which affected our economics. But over time, the great thing about research and academia is that they're constantly putting out new stuff, and for the most part, it's open source. So we're able to use open source off-the-shelf models, which has progressed to, I think we're using Ultralytics models today, YOLO V5 or 8. But with those advancements in model algorithms, that's brought with it increases in accuracy. As we're increasing the quality of our data set, the models, the algorithms themselves are getting better, and the speed is getting better. So we're able to run models on more cameras, higher resolutions, higher frame rates, which all of those things turn into better detection performance for us. And we expect that trend to continue in the future. Obviously, we're still talking about object detection models today, which is kind of like single frame analysis, but with the potential for large language models and vision transformers and things like that, we see a lot of advancement in the future, not just on the detection side, but also on the context side. What can we communicate about the image itself to our customers to provide the best situational intelligence?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you about that. That big area of advancement that we've seen over the past couple of years, it's all kind of centered around large language models, transformer architecture, the vision models that you mentioned. So that is something that you're exploring early stages, maybe?
Yeah, it's something that we see as a huge opportunity because today we're providing this situational awareness of gun or no gun. There's either a gun in the image or there's not. And then we have a human in the loop that allows us to maximize our detection performance while eliminating false positives. So customers will never receive a false positive. But the potential with large language models is now you can extract a little bit more context from the scene, and you can also provide a little bit more dynamic inputs. So looking for more dynamic scenes or different objects in different configurations that wouldn't be realistic with a single model like we're doing today.
We'll stick on that side for a second. You mentioned something else that I want to get into in a minute, but that'll keep. On the language model side, the idea of greater context on the images that you're talking about, right? That's really interesting because, like you said, right now, gun or no gun, that's kind of it. Other context, I mean, in a security situation like that, any added piece of information is probably going to be very nice to have. But I wonder, as you start experimenting with deploying or, incorporating additional models of different types, I wonder how that changes your validation process, because the gun or no gun thing is a little more of a straightforward thing. It's a different type of model. Language models have reliability issues. And I wonder how much that might be a challenge, or if there's a way, maybe through specific data sets, small language models, other techniques and safeguards to make that work.
Well, I think there's two parts of that. One is just like all good security comes in layers, I think the same thing is going to be applicable for AI. And in our case, I think there'll be multiple layers of AI models in the future that process all of the detections that we generate, but it also kind of highlights the value of that human in the loop, right? So if we were to send a detection directly through to the end customer and provide some layer of analysis from a large language model, it's very possible that that's incorrect and that it could confuse or, cause some sort of issue in the response, the critical incident response. And today we have a human in the loop that essentially does the same thing, but they're also capable of performing other actions. So, during a critical scenario, when we see a gun and click dispatch, that's also initiating a call to 911 dispatch that's closest to the camera location. And someone on our team is also getting on the phone with points of contact at the customer to be able to verbally communicate these things. And I don't see the value of having a human in the loop ever being fully automated or deprecated, because the value during a critical scenario is we're able to communicate directly to that POC and not rely on just the output of the AI.
And so I guess what you were just talking about there, that's the point that I wanted to get to and make sure we drill down on, because we've been kind of talking around it. But for anyone who's not familiar with what you guys do, right? It's object detection designed for to scan for weaponry in CCTV footage. That's all linked up with warning systems. You have teams of people that review flags from the system. But I would love if you could kind of walk me through, if I was a point of contact, if I was one of your customers and we put in however many dozens of cameras we had, and something happens. Your camera picks up a flag. Can you just walk me through what that process looks like from kind of inception of, the model says we might have something here, and whatever happens next?
I'll take a step back and just talk about it from the entire value chain, because you're absolutely right. We didn't actually cover that in the beginning. We're connecting to real-time security cameras, all of the customers' existing security infrastructure, and we're pulling a RTSP feed, a real-time streaming protocol feed, from that camera and running an AI on the video feed frame by frame that's looking for the presence of a gun. At the point at which our AI says it's pretty confident that this object is a gun, it's going to send that detection to a human in the loop. And the human in the loop is in our ZOC, our ZeroEyes Operations Center. We have one located just outside of Philadelphia here, and then another in Honolulu, Hawaii. So we're able to make use of those time zone differences. The operators in the ZOC are performing an analysis to verify whether or not the detection has a real gun in it. So they see a real gun and they click dispatch. That dispatch button initiates all of our third-party alerting methods. So we have a dashboard and a mobile app ourselves, but we also integrate with local 911. We integrate with other third-party services in order to get the detection information to the customer in the best way that they can utilize it. So from dispatch, our ZOC operators will get connected to local 911. They'll communicate and verify that local 911 has access to the alert image, and they're able to generate an incident based on that. But at the same time, we're also calling points of contact at the customer site. And what we're trying to communicate is basically what we're visualizing on our side. So the ZOC has a specific script that they stick to, but it's essentially something like, we have an alert, a ZeroEyes weapon detection alert of what appears to be a person brandishing a rifle in this setting. And that is really the initiation for an incident on the customer side. Customers have all different standard operating procedures of how they want to be notified and what they do following notification. But I do foresee more automation in the future around that, where today we're basically handing off situational awareness to the customer and allowing them to respond. But I see a lot of benefit in ZeroEyes being involved in that response in some way. Whether it's something as simple as providing expertise in how a school or a commercial office building should respond to that threat, all the way through to initiating other forms of response, like dispatching alerts into access control systems, providing one-click access control capabilities, so that customers can actually take action from the ZeroEyes alert and best initiate their response.
Kind of in line with what you were just mentioning about being more involved in the action. I wonder how far something like this goes. And thinking about where you are right now, where you might want to go as you keep growing. Since you're analyzing real-time footage, right? Like that's kind of the whole fundamental crux of what you're dealing with. If there was an attack, a person brandishing the rifle, or maybe the person's in a hallway. They're locked in a room, they're moving. Would you be able to track the movement of these kinds of assailants? And in an action stage, beyond just saying, there's a person here, do something about it, could you physically, or do you physically, you know, speak to local police officers on the phone and say, okay, this is exactly where the person is. They're in this hallway. They are doing this right now. They are moving. They just turned left. Kind of like an Overwatch thing. Is that a function at all of what you might be able to do?
So yes and no. We aren't. We don't have visibility into the customer's camera systems to the extent that we could actually provide that video or watch a shooter walk from camera to camera, and we do that for privacy reasons. Basically, our AI is the only piece that has access to the live video. But that being said, you're highlighting on a really key point of our value, and that is even after the first shot is fired and we know there's a gunman on site, we don't know where he is at any specific point, or the first responders don't know. And so every time that shooter walks in front of a new camera that's running ZeroEyes and we're able to get a new detection, we are dispatching that and updating law enforcement. We do have some local police departments that use our mobile app, and they get the alerts directly to the mobile app for each individual officer. But the general feedback we've gotten is that they would prefer to get that information over the radio from dispatch. And so our biggest point of contact is that 911 dispatch center, and our integration with a company called Rapid SOS gives us the ability to automatically be connected to the closest 911 dispatch center to where our customer is located based on their camera location. So that puts us in direct phone contact with 911 PSAPs, public safety answering points, and those PSAPs are the ones that are contacting and communicating with first responders.
And so because of that integration, any officers on the ground, as well as points of contact at whatever building or location you're dealing with, they know the flag was picked up by, camera 22B and hallway 7 on the second floor, or whatever it is. So they have a deeper level of situational awareness beyond there's a problem.
Definitely. You also highlight a really important point, which is a unified mapping interface. Because if our customer is looking at a map and we're looking at a different map, and police responding are looking at a third different map, it becomes really confusing trying to communicate about landscapes or landmarks and where things are located. And so having a unified mapping interface, which we partner with a company called CRG, Critical Response Group, and they produce really high quality interior maps. So when our customer has a CRG map, they're able to provide that to us, and we are able to overlay that on our dispatch map so that both the customer and our ZOC operation team is looking at the same map. And wherever possible, we also include the local 911 PSAPs in that when we send our alerts, so that responding officers are hopefully seeing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned for the ZOC, for the operators that review these flags, that no false positives, I think is what you said. How are these operators trained, and I guess what's their protocol in terms of validating that whatever has been flagged is real or is not a concern? And I mean, I guess taking that a step further, if you get a flag that turns out not to be a gun, but maybe is something a little weird, is that a different type of alert that you send as well?
I would say the operators back in the ZOC have really difficult jobs. They are on a daily basis. They see guns on a daily basis. A lot of times it's toy guns or ROTC rifles, but they're constantly required to make split-second decisions, which is why we focused on hiring veterans and local law enforcement or former law enforcement into the ZOC, because those individuals back there both have the training in understanding what a gun looks like and how to respond to a critical scenario, but also as a part of their former careers as military and law enforcement. A lot of times they're doing very similar jobs. They're either had watch posts, or they were performing some sort of surveillance where they had to do, basically the same thing and be able to, during a critical scenario, remain calm and calmly communicate critical pieces of information that could be happening at the same time people are actively under threat. So we've had a lot of success hiring former law enforcement and former military personnel into the ZOC, and like I said, they have a really difficult job on a daily basis. They have to understand unique standard operating procedures from different customers and be able to communicate to the customer in the best way that the customer needs that information. And how that translates into real life, I mean, we've made dozens of arrests at this point of people that had guns in areas that they shouldn't have. But we also communicate with customers on a daily basis about non-lethal gun threats. And like I said, every customer has their own SOPs. For instance, some customers want us to disregard any toy gun detections. Other customers still want to know about them. And that extends to a wide array of scenarios that include all different types of guns being presented from law enforcement or known trainings, things like that. So as much as possible, we try to communicate with our customers so that we're aware of any reasons that there should be a gun on premise. But generally, our customers want to know, regardless of what type of gun it is or what the scenario is. And that's an awesome point of communication for the ZOC. So even if we see something that we believe is non-threatening, it's easy enough just to call up the customer and have that conversation and communicate and verify that there's no active incident going on.
Yeah, I'd want to know.
Yeah.
I'd want to know. You mentioned that your work, I guess, has led to a bunch of arrests of people who had weapons in places that they shouldn't have had them. I'm wondering what else you can tell me about the results that you've seen. Like we've talked about, you've launched in 2018, you've been in operation, and growing into new places. What kind of situations have you come across and been able to mitigate or address?
Yeah, so since 2018, we've expanded to, I think we're up to 47 states. We're spread out throughout the entire country on K-12, public transit. On the commercial side, we're in big box retail and logistics centers and things like that. We haven't had that stereotypical detection and arrest of somebody that appeared to be, entering a school to commit a mass shooting. But we've, in early days, maybe we would see a gun once a month. We're absolutely seeing guns, dozens of guns on a daily basis in areas that I never thought we would see guns. And so the performance of the model itself has proven itself as we scale. We're generating detections all the time. And in the scenarios that we've run with local law enforcement and law enforcement at customer sites, we've been able to identify that the reduction in response time is considerable. So comparing response times without ZeroEyes alerts, first responders are basically showing up at a school and not knowing where the shooter is located. So they enter that school. It could take them 5 to 15 minutes to clear the school and locate the actual shooter. And there's been plenty of real life examples like Uvalde where there's been real serious challenges around that. So in the testing that we've done, we've been able to considerably reduce response time and direct first responders exactly where in the building they should be located. It's something as simple as if first responders show up to the wrong side of the building and they enter the wrong door, that could mean 15 minutes in lost response time. So wherever possible, we're really focused on reducing that response time to get first responders to the actual location as quickly as possible.
You mentioned you're seeing dozens of guns every day in places that you wouldn't expect. Are these... what are those kinds of situations? Are people just kind of carrying and they're walking around and they're carrying? Is there intent to violence? Do those always lead to kind of reactions in terms of law enforcement, but in terms of, the customer that you're securing? Is there responses to that, or is it, oh no, he's okay? Like what? I mean, obviously each
Yeah.
one's different, but
Yeah, short answer is it totally depends. But I would say that for the most part, fake guns are starting to look more and more like real guns. If you pick up an airsoft rifle at your local Walmart, that airsoft rifle is almost indistinguishable from an actual AR. And even more so when students will paint the orange tips black or remove the orange tips. Um, so a lot of times we don't necessarily know if the gun is a fake gun or a real gun, and we have to essentially treat it as though it's a real gun. So I would say that's probably one of the more common scenarios that we see. Also, a lot of times we see people um, using objects like cell phones and pointing them at each other as though they're real guns. There's a very popular TikTok challenge that's been going around the last few years called Senior Assassin, which is about the most insensitive thing that I think you could do in nowadays climate. Um, but students are bringing airsoft rifles or fake pistols, or in some cases real guns, to school in order to perform these mock senior assassinations and post them online. I couldn't tell you how many detections we've gotten that were similar to that, where we see students basically filming themselves pointing guns at each other um, in order to fulfill this TikTok challenge. Um, so in cases like that, we always respond to the customer. We let them know what we're seeing. We try to communicate as much detail about the scene as possible, but ultimately it's on the customer to respond and uh, execute on their SOPs in accordance.
senior assassins, huh?
Yeah.
Oh man. But and so you mentioned, I just want to, clarify, right? Like you haven't been involved in or encountered directly any of the kind of mass violence events that occur.
Luckily, no. I
Yeah.
think about this sometimes, and obviously, if an event does happen, I want to be there. I want to be on those cameras to be able to detect it. But thankfully, we've not really been involved in a mass shooting event. Um, I think it's only a matter of time, though. The more cameras we're on, the more guns we're going to see, the more coverage we're going to have, and um, I just pray that when we're in that situation, that we're able to make the detection before people get hurt.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned that you're in 47 states now, and you have a ZOC in Pennsylvania and in Hawaii. So you cover the different time zones. They're operational all the time. How does the ZOC scale in kind with the scale of your emplacements and your model? Like, how many more people do you need for each building or state that you add?
Today, we're able to monitor the entire United States from just those two operating centers. I anticipate in the future we're going to expand and build operating centers in other locations, but today we're able to just basically follow a model that says when we add X number of cameras, we're going to expect to see X number of additional alerts, and that increases our head count. So we follow a pretty linear model in that sense. We also try to staff people based on alert load throughout the day. As you can imagine, we get the most false positives during the times of day that are most active in front of cameras. So if you think about a school, that's the 5 minutes every hour when students are walking in between classrooms. And so during the day, probably 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., we staff heavier than we need to during the nights and off times and weekends. But it's been pretty standard for us, and the more scale that we have, the more different sites that we're on, the more data that we include from those different sites into our model to make it better, the more predictable our scaling model is. So
Mm-hmm.
that part of our business has been really tight.
Now, on the privacy side, which you kind of referenced earlier when I was talking about the whole Overwatchy type thing, Them have access to these cameras, but you're not watching those camera feeds necessarily. You'll get like the frame that was flagged, but you train, like you just said, the data that you gather, you use to train the models, and so and I'm sure this probably varies customer to customer, but I'm wondering on the privacy side, if we're thinking about schools or public places, these big box retailers, for example, how you work on the data side to ensure privacy, and like what specific components, I guess, of these images that they'll use to train your models on. Is it anonymized in some way, faces cut or blurred out, or whatever? How do you navigate that?
For our training data, we try not to obfuscate as much as possible because we're concerned that it'll affect the context of the model. But for any data that's coming from a customer, we do remove faces so that we're not infringing on any privacy of the customer. Obviously, it's something that we get the customer's permission ahead of time. We're very close with our customers in that respect. But on the data training side, we've from the very beginning tried to distance ourselves from any sort of biometric detection or recognition, specifically to address that privacy concern. So instead of detecting a person and then detecting a gun, we're strictly looking for a visible firearm. And all of our data that is annotated for that specific firearm. So avoiding the facial recognition piece, avoiding any sort of biometric analysis has allowed us to distance ourselves from privacy concerns with our customers. And because of that, I think our customers trust us. They trust that we're not looking at their live video. They trust that we're not detecting or biased in any way that would affect our ability to detect guns in real time.
And there's also a security side as well. Obviously, there's security to everything we're talking about. You're a security company, but the security of the model, the security of the cameras and the warning system, and you talked about on-prem deployments, but I'm wondering about, and I'm just going to throw a kind of stupid like movie scenario at you. Would it be possible, or if possible, how do you mitigate for someone to somehow gain access to or hack into your system to trigger a false alarm? I don't know exactly how that would work, but if they were to gain access, is that a real security concern on your end, that your system could become compromised in a way that sends a kind of cycle into effect?
I would say that's probably lower on my list of concerns. I mean, getting hacked in general or being, falling prey to some sort of social engineering is always in the back of my mind, and probably is for any technology leader or startup founder. But that piece of our business, it always runs through the ZOC. So the only way for an image to be dispatched to our customers is for somebody in the ZOC to actually click dispatch and send it out. Like I said, we have a really tight connection with our customers. So even in the event that there was an accidental dispatch, we would have direct line to the customer to be able to de-escalate immediately if that were to happen. So I haven't run any scenarios with that specific threat in mind. But yeah, it's always in the back of my mind that we'll get hacked in some way that will either, expose some vulnerable information to the world, or like our customer information, or in this scenario, affect our ability to dispatch or send errant information out into the universe to our customers. So it's always a threat, but that one in particular, I'm not too worried about.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I've got a couple more for you. And the first thing is something that I've been thinking about, which is, I wonder how much you're thinking about or exploring ways that this work expands beyond gun-specific detection. ZeroEyes doesn't have anything about guns right in its name. And the idea of object detection tied to warning systems with humans in the loop connected to first responders seems to me that it could scale to other situations. I mean, I even think about a fire, for instance, in a school building, the same way that your systems can tell first responders which camera flagged, an alert. It would seem to be a very advanced fire alarm for you to be able to tell someone there's a fire and this is exactly where it is. So evacuate accordingly, right? Like that kind of thing. Other threats beyond guns. I wonder if that's something that you're thinking about.
From the very beginning, we've been exclusively focused on being the best at one thing instead of mediocre at a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. And that's served us really well up until this point in the company. That being said, our expertise in AI and object detection lends itself really well to expanding into other use cases like this. I see it generally as we are a very high value trigger for an incident to start, and I would love to expand those triggers to cover more incidents. Things like perimeter security and intrusion detection, health and safety, to your point. There's a lot of work being done on the real time, on sorry, I just lost the word. On the retail side, with loss prevention. So I see there's applications across many verticals that touch the same customers that we do. I foresee that we're going to continue to be focused on guns, but start to expand into some of these other areas that lend themselves well. And ultimately moving into a future where vision transformers and large language models are more easily accessible in real time, it opens up a lot of possibilities. We could take this in a lot of different directions, and ultimately try to solve as many customer value problems as possible. But yeah, very interested in intrusion detection, other types of weapons like knives and just aggressive behavior and in general, things like that. And then ultimately, we want that trigger to initiate some sort of valuable response. Today, that is us sending situational awareness to our customers so that they can respond, but we're still sending a person to deal with a very dangerous situation. And so I would love to initiate additional response like locking down doors or sending a drone to verify the incident and just have additional eyes on, I think is a very likely future for us. If you can imagine a first responder showing up to the scene after there's been a drone there for 5 minutes, showing them what exactly is going on, they have the ultimate situational awareness that they wouldn't have otherwise. And given the dangerous nature of first responder jobs and security jobs, I think it's completely natural that at some point in the future there will be some sort of response assistance that helps them perform their job better.
Yeah, there's a lot of places you can take it, I guess, when you start thinking about it like that.
Sure.
Drones, automated security. I guess you almost see the beginnings of like a RoboCop type thing. I don't know that would be a good thing.
It's definitely hard to differentiate and diverge your thinking between what is sci-fi and what is real life. And we get questions about that all the time, total recall type analysis where privacy is a thing of the past. It's something we're sensitive to, and as much as possible, I want to avoid privacy issues because I care about that personally myself. But at the same time, there's so much possibility on the response side to incorporate drones and robots, autonomous response into areas where otherwise it's a person's life on the line.
Right. I even think specifically for something like the hurt locker, like if that could be done completely with robots, that would be good. Sending people in the suits to diffuse these things is crazy. But that also raises an interesting point that I always think is interesting because, like we've mentioned several times, you guys have been around for several years before the kind of boom in AI that we're dealing with now. And I wonder, I guess, how if it got easier to talk to clients about what your offering is when AI became much more in the public vernacular, and if in a weird way that also made it a little bit more difficult because a lot of it is tied up, as you mentioned, right, with people from outside the industry who have a hard time sifting through fiction and the hype with what's actually happening.
Yeah, our biggest challenge in the early days was convincing people that it wasn't snake oil. And so, I mean, we ran so many demos at that point, just trying to prove to people that we could actually detect guns. And then they said, well, you're showing us you being detected with a gun. I want to hold the gun and be detected to really prove it out. And so a lot of it has been proving out that AI security of the past was maybe embellished on the sales side to an extent that it caused customers to think that AI wasn't capable of performing in real time on security cameras. And we spent the last 7, 8 years trying to change that opinion a little bit. And then going forward with the emergence of large language models and vision transformers and some of the common topics around them, like copyright infringement, potential lawsuits, these large language models using public data in some way. It's caused a lot of questions about how we collect our data, and that's been one of our strong selling points to the customer is that all of this data is organic to ZeroEyes. There's no risk of us infringing on any copyrights or using any public data. It's all stuff that we've meticulously developed in-house and have scrubbed to maintain the highest quality possible. So I would say those are probably the two areas that we see overlaps with old and new AI.
Yeah, yeah. You operate at the intersection in an interesting way. It's different from a lot of other AI companies that I talk to. But my last point, I guess, just to leave off here is, I wish you guys weren't needed. And it's interesting, you start the company, this team of veterans, in the wake of a devastating mass shooting, and that's a problem and a crisis that hasn't really abated too much. And so here, where you sit with a technological solution and this kind of goal to, through detection and better response times, to mitigate violence on the ground, whether that's someone has an airsoft gun or whether that's a mass shooting might be about to happen, we have to get over there. The idea of the kind of technological solution to a problem that bleeds beyond technology. I wonder what you think about that and what other levers should be considered, or if the reality of the world we live in is one where it's like technology is kind of the best thing we have left to try and mitigate what's going on.
I also wish we weren't needed. I think about that almost on a daily basis. As a company, we follow gun violence throughout the country really closely. And so I see on a daily basis the news reports of shootings and gun violence that happen all over the country. And yeah, I when people come up to me and they say, how's business doing? I say it's good. Unfortunately, people keep committing gun violence, and there's probably deeper issues at play there. But when I think about our position with the customer, we're providing a layer of security. And so when we go into a new customer, they trust us based on our track record and expansion to basically be an expert to them about how their security should look. And so we're able to really provide this great feedback where, maybe a customer is struggling with their camera system and it doesn't even make sense to buy ZeroEyes until their camera system is upgraded. And so we're happy to make that recommendation to them because at the end of the day, our performance won't be as great on older cameras, lower resolution cameras. And it matters to us that our customers have the highest security posture that they possibly could. So we're in this really awesome kind of expert position for our customers, and all good security comes in layers. We're just one piece of it, and we're trying to address that gap of being that first early warning sign to communicate to customers when there's a visible gun, when there's a weapon that's brandished on their physical site. And so, yeah, going forward into the future, I see a huge possibility for us to be really ingrained with the customer to be that expert and to provide that knowledge that's needed to understand how to respond to one of these incidents. Hopefully, the vast majority of our customers will never experience one of these incidents, but with the prevalence of gun violence and how it's expanding, that's becoming more and more likely. And it's not as easy for customers to just say, that's not going to happen to me. They have to be prepared in some way, and we're in this awesome position to help them prepare. So I think we're just one layer in their broader physical security, but we're a critical layer at this point. I hope I answered your question. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That was a really good question, though.
Thanks. Yeah, but from that perspective, the future is exciting, but again, dark at the same time, but exciting.
Yeah, we as a company, we have to do well in order to do good. That's one of our kind of principles. In other words, we have to be profitable in order to expand to more cameras so that we can cover enough cameras in order to fulfill our mission, which is stopping gun violence. And so we live and breathe it at a daily basis here at ZeroEyes. And when people come in to work every day, they're singularly focused on that mission of ending gun violence. And it's a beautiful place to work because of that, but it does come with the weight and heaviness of an important mission.
It's a heavy mission. Well, Tim, I appreciate you letting me steal you away from it for a little bit and walking me through what you do. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, it was great talking with you, Ian. Thank you.